Hello and welcome to a review of First Flight by Chris Claremont. Now this was a surprisingly not terrible book, and that actually comes across quite wrong. I'm not trying to be insulting here, but I'd never heard of Chris Claremont when I picked up this book. It was one of my finds last November when I got a couple of hundred books for $1 each. All of them science fiction and fantasy. And I looked at this, and by then I was in that buying frenzy where you just grab everything you can see and throw it in the box. And I thought, why not? It's a bit of a joke cover. I thought it was going to be a bit of a joke book, but it's surprisingly not as terrible as it seems. So, being as how I entirely judged this book by the cover, it's been sitting there on the shelf. I kept seeing it and going, oh, I'm not in the mood for a really bad book. You know how sometimes you do just want to read something that's a bad book, that you're going to laugh at, that you're not going to take seriously, that you really don't care about. And I thought this would be that. It's not far off, but not quite. Anyway, let's start with the cover, because that's entirely what I was judging it by. And it's so very 80s. So very 80s. You've got that hair, the big hair of the 80s strikes again. I think this was actually published in 79, but near enough that I can call it an 80s book. That hair is so... It does look a little bit if someone grabbed a hearth rug and dumped it on the head of the unfortunate model. The unfortunate model in question, of course, has got all the beauty standards, including the high cheek makeup and extensive eye makeup of any self-respecting model from the 80s. They're wearing a sort of flight suit, though I think it's meant to be a space flight suit that is actually probably more suited to extensive night clubbing than going into space. And perhaps aware that they'd created something that looks less like Top Gun and more like a model for the next super nightclub opening downtown, in a small downtown. The designers of this cover then chose to what looks like Photoshop, photocopy, montage, I don't know, decoupage, what looks like actual photos of actual instruments on top of the whole thing, and you end up with a cover that's pretty bad. It wraps around. You've got what I suspect is meant to be the moon base on the back. It's not a bad book. I like its heft. It's comfortable to read. And I thought, why not? 243 pages of potentially bad book. It isn't that bad. So I thought I'd never heard of Chris Claremont, the author, when I picked it up. I was wrong, actually. I had heard of Chris Claremont. I don't think you can quite see it in the background, but I've got quite a few Marvel comics, as well as other trade paperbacks of all denominations. And Chris Claremont, apparently, is primarily a writer of comics. And it sounds like Marvel was a big part of that. I gather they've already also been involved in some of the movies. If you're a Marvel comic reader, or if you've seen any Marvel movies, and I'm not sure there's anyone on the face of the earth that hasn't at this point, then a lot of the tropes and themes in here aren't going to seem that unfamiliar. I'm not going to worry at all about spoilers in this either. I'm not going to tell you everything, but I'm not going to limit what I'm saying based on spoilers. Excuse me. Come here. Small dinosaur. Say hello to YouTube, small dinosaur. And, okay, so we start off with two characters. Our main character, Nicole Shear, is in the commander or captain's seat, and her best mate from school, when we're talking about flight school, so we're probably talking about something that's taken them about 20 years to achieve or something, I don't know. His name's Paul. He's in the secondary seat, and the flight is going terribly wrong. I think it's interstellar to the moon or something like that. Anyway, it's just thing after thing have gone wrong. Nicole's had to take off her space helmet, which is described as a fishbowl type affair. to correct an airflow, and then bad thing after bad thing happens. With any experience at all in the genre or in the era, very early on, it will be incredibly obvious that this can't possibly be a real life scenario this close in on the book, that this is a simulation. I say that. I can never guess endings of books, probably because I never ever try. I can't even tell who done it at the end of an Agatha Christie novel, usually because I don't try. The reading experience is what I'm there for. I'm not there to solve crimes. I'm not there to know the endings of things. And yet, within a couple of pages, the fact that this was starting with a simulation was so incredibly obvious that I don't think anyone is going to miss that. Shades of Star Trek, the new movies? Maybe so. There's certainly a lot of Star Trek nods in here. There's a point later on where the command module of an alien spacecraft is described, and the way it's described, all I could see was the original Star Trek command module, flight deck, whatever. I'm not a huge Star Trek fan, but there were a lot of nods that I got, so I'm going to guess there's a lot of nods that I didn't get as well. Rightio, so starting with an action-packed event, we then go on to have exactly what First Flight looks like it's going to be. We've got our main character, Nicole. She aced her exam. Of course she did. She's done better than anyone ever before. Of course she has. The board don't want to let her through because reasons, whatever. Of course they don't. Someone steps in. She doesn't know she has allies. Of course she doesn't. So Nicole passes. She's introduced to the captain. Oh, come on. What is it? And she gets sent off on her very own first flight, which is meant to be a 1 year long mission where the ship, with her as captain and her best bud who's also just graduated, as the two people flying this billions and billions of dollars worth thing on a mission to do something in an outer planet that desperately needs to be done. I'm old, I'm cynical. When I was 18, I'd have loved that. Young, untried, going off in command of their own special. Not total command, there's a commander as well. There's a crew of a couple of scientists, 3 scientists, I think, and various other things. It's not terrible. It's very predictable in a lot of ways. So anyway, they head off onto this long cruise. There's a love interest, and of course there's a lot of conflict. Do I, don't I, does he, doesn't he, whatever. He's also the marshal on board, so he does the obligatory, gonna teach her martial arts. She's going to be a superstar martial artist in 0G. Ticks that box as well. There's space pirates later, and then it ends up, after about half the book, of not being as bad as I thought it was going to be, but being pretty predictable and not that amazing. It then turns into a rather decent First Contact story, which I didn't expect. Maybe I didn't read the back well enough. Oh yes, I didn't read the back well enough. A craft is approaching that was not of human origin. At that stage, I was already pretty invested in the story because some interesting things had happened. The obligatory best friend has died, of course. That's not a spoiler. Anyone reading that would have to know that those two, one of them was going to have to die and it wasn't going to be Nicole. Because that's just the way these plots go, right? There's things that are what they are. Anyway, so after the obligatory deaths, after the obligatory spaceship malfunctions, they're drifting in and out of space, that's when the First Contact occurs. And it's actually a very interesting, very well done First Contact. You've got this other race, Q-cat type aliens, but I didn't mind that. They know Earth's there for reasons that they explain quite well, and which I enjoyed. And they're on their own First Contact mission to contact Earth. Circumstances aren't ideal. more space pirates, more space battles, and it's a lot of fun. So, I do sound quite cynical about this book. I will say that the first half of the book, you had to be in the mood to read pretty much exactly the sort of book that this looks like it's going to be. Not bad, but is what it is. If you've watched the Marvel movies, and I was an addict until Infinity War made me never pay another cent for Marvels, totally different topic. I watched all of them, and I've rewatched many of them. You can see similar themes and similar tropes. Not a bad thing. The reason they did so well was because they were good and people liked them. This does a lot of good things that people would like. It would have been far more exciting to first read it in the early 80s than it is to read it now. I sincerely hope that Chris C.S. Claremont never watches this video, but whatever. World famous comics author of X-Men and Excalibur. I don't know how I never noticed that when I was buying a book. It's right here and it's pretty prominent, but I didn't notice that. Again, X-Men, a lot of tropes. So you've got that whole meta-human, better-than-human trope, and there's elements of that in here. None of these are mutants, none of them are exceptional in that way, but there's a lot of exceptionality happening, and there's some mental stuff that goes on. And our main character, Nicole, is set up to be a superstar in that very specific way that the X-Men actually did better than anyone else. So should you read it? If you like this particular theme, maybe. I wouldn't go running out to buy it. If you saw it on the shelf and you were up for something that was a little bit schmaltzy, but the higher end of schmaltz, then yeah, I'd say go for it. There's another nod to Star Trek right at the back when they're setting off for a diplomatic mission to the cat people whose name I can't pronounce, because if you add too many random capital letters in a strung together set of vowels with too many apostrophes here, there and everywhere, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that. And McCaffrey is where I stopped with that stuff. So right at the end you've got this mission to the cat people who aren't cats, and they call the ship the Enterprise. So I'd say you've got an awful lot of nods to Star Trek in general in here. Or at least to the Star Treks that were around back in '79 when this first came out. Do recommend, within all the limitations that I've mentioned here. Have I missed anything that I really wanted to say? Yes, I think I have. In the first part of the book, we've got especially an awful lot of hints being dropped about Nicole and her background with Major Claremont, who's in charge of the moon or somewhere or other, who's the reason she passed her advisory board, which she almost didn't pass, even though she aced the simulation better than anyone ever had. They were designed to fail, but she came the closest to beating the computer that anyone ever had. So they were thinking of making her fail because I never got that, but there was a reason. So Major or Commander or whatever Claremont got her through. There's all these hints about background that she doesn't believe she shares. Her father's a lawyer, her mother's a journalist. She has no connection to any of these people that she knows. And we keep getting hints that there's a secret, deep connection that she doesn't know about. If you're going to do that many of them, and they just kept coming, you have to give me something at the back. And you have to give me something at the back more than, oh, your father once met one of them. That's insufficient for the purpose of all those hints. I didn't like that. In general, the first part of the book is harder to read because there's not as much there. You've got too many of the tropes that make no sense, like giving this ship into the hands of a commander who's just come straight out of flight school and her last simulator test. It's like, that makes no sense. But if you were going to do that, at least her co-pilot would be experienced, not the guy who just came out of the simulator with her. The second you saw that, you knew he was doomed. even in normal airplane flying, you don't take someone who's just ticked the last flight hour of practice and put him in charge of a 747, do you? They fly shotgun for a while. At least I really hope they do. Everything that I've heard suggests they do. Let's put it that way. So yeah, a lot of tropes, a lot of themes, but surprisingly not as bad a book as I really thought this was going to be from its cover. So it took me a long time to read because it was hard to engage. I'd read a little bit and then I'd wander off to do other things. I didn't yearn to get back to this book, even in the last, when you've got a major starfight, battle-y, important thing happening. I never felt I couldn't put it down, not once. I never felt I was really jonesing to pick it up, not once. But when I did pick it up, enjoyable reading experience. Thank you for listening to my review. Read good books, not necessarily this one, because I am still on the fence as to whether it's a good book or not, though I did enjoy it. I'd probably give that a solid 3 out of 5 Goodreads stars, maybe even a 3.5. Would I go back and look for the next 2 that I believe are in this series? I really probably wouldn't, unless someone down in the comments who has read them all tells me, oh, you have to, omnivorous reader. They are marvellous, so much better than the first one. Hey, it's possible. See you. Thank you for watching.